My name is Sarah, I'm the mom of Justin Bieber the cat, and today I'm going to teach you about paw targeting. So when it comes to teaching your pet to talk, the hardest part tends to be getting them to actually press the buttons. They might not seem interested at all, they might be pressing the buttons by sitting on them or rolling over onto them, or they might be tapping the buttons but not pressing hard enough to activate them. My cat Justin went through all of these phases, and for us, paw targeting helped him go from total disinterest to successful button activation over the course of a week. I've shared this method on social media and I've heard tons of similar success stories. In this video, I'm going to talk about how to teach paw targeting, how to go from paw targeting to successful button activation, and ideas for what to do if your pet isn't food motivated. This video assumes you've watched my previous video on how to teach your pet to talk, which covers the basics and talks about how to teach the meanings associated with the buttons. This video is just about physical button pressing. In other words, it covers the how, but make sure you understand the why first. For the purposes of this video, I'm going to assume that you already have your first two buttons set up. I'm going to be referring to those as your regular buttons, and the button that you'll use for paw target training as your training button. So with Justin, I introduced paw targeting after about 2 months of regular button training, but that was only because I hadn't heard of this method sooner. Since it sped up his progress so significantly, if I were to do it again, I think I would introduce paw targeting about a week or two after the regular buttons, just enough time to let him get used to them and to avoid overwhelming him. And make sure you don't forget about the regular buttons once you start paw target training and are continuing to model them regularly for your pet. Paw target training tends to be a pretty short process, and most pets pick it up in as little as 1 to 2 sessions. You only need to spend about 10 to 15 minutes a day on this, and stop whenever your pet seems to be getting frustrated. Let's get started. So to get started, you'll need 3 things. The first is, of course, a button. Mine are from Fluent Pet, there's a link in the description below, but you can use any brand. And because we're using it for training, we want to record it with a nonsense word so your pet doesn't associate the meaning with anything. Mine just said boop. The second thing you'll need are treats that motivate your pet. I had to try a bunch of different kinds until I found something that Justin liked enough to use this method. If your pet isn't food motivated, I'll cover that later in this video. The third thing you'll need is a clear plastic container that's bigger than the buttons you're using. You could use Tupperware, I'm just using this piece of plastic I found. Step 1. Put a treat under the container and hold it still. The idea is for your pet to paw at the container trying to get the treat underneath. When they touch the top of the container, say paw and reward them. Once they've got this down, you can move on to step 2. Step 2. Repeat step 1 without a treat under the container. Give them the paw command and reward them for touching the container. What we're doing here is creating some distance between the action and the reward. Step 3. Place the container over a button, give the paw command, and reward them if they touch the container. This step is working on transferring the motion over to the buttons. Step 4. Remove the container, we're just using the button now. Give them the paw command and reward them if they touch the button. We don't need them to activate it at this stage. At first, we just want to reward them for touching it at all. If you made it to step 4, congratulations! You're 90% of the way to button pressing. Your pet might make it all the way to step 4 in one session, or it could take a couple days. You can stay on each step as long as you need, and don't be afraid to move back and forth between steps. One thing to keep in mind is that just like the regular buttons, you should occasionally be modeling the training button during paw targeting sessions. You don't always have to give them a treat, you can alternate with praise and attention, but we want them to learn that the sound is what brings the result. So if you got lucky, your pet could be pressing buttons already. But if you're like me, you're probably seeing light taps or touches and wondering what to do next. First of all, I want you to know that that's common. A lot of pets, especially cats, get stuck at this stage. Justin definitely did too. So here's what we can do to help. So first things first, like I mentioned in my first training video, although it's tempting, you never want to take your pet's paw and press it onto the button for them. Not only can it create negative associations with the buttons, it also doesn't teach them how to put weight onto the buttons themselves. As difficult as it can seem, it's something they need to figure out on their own. What we're doing with this process is giving them the puzzle pieces to put together. We've taught them paw targeting to teach them how to put their paw on a button. And we're modeling the buttons for them to teach them that good things happen when the buttons make sound. If we can get them to activate a button on their own, even accidentally, they're in a really good spot to make that connection and start pressing buttons with intent and purpose. So how do we get them to activate it? The most important thing you can do is to continue with daily paw target training sessions and to gradually get stricter about what you reward. During your sessions, I'd recommend starting from the beginning each time with the treat under the container, since this is likely when your pet is using the most force to try to get the treat. We want to wait to lift up the container until they're giving us a nice clean touch on the top of it, not when they're tapping or batting at the sides. And you want to carry this standard throughout all the steps of paw target training, only rewarding when you're getting nice clean touches. It's a fine line between challenging and frustrating your pet, so make sure you're not moving too quickly so they maintain interest. Now, it's important that you keep this up, but I know that the slow and steady method isn't the most exciting, and you're probably ready for your pet to be pressing buttons yesterday. So here are a few more tips and tricks that can help speed things up. So like I mentioned in my first training video, accidental presses count at the beginning of this process. That means if your pet accidentally steps or lays on a button, you want to reward the heck out of them. You want them to be trying to figure out what they did that made you so happy and try to repeat it. We can use that concept to our advantage by trying to engineer scenarios that make it more likely for your pet to accidentally activate a button. Your daily paw target training sessions are helping with this process too. By making button training an activity that's fun and enjoyable, your pets are more likely to start messing with the buttons on their own. So here are some ideas to help encourage accidental presses. The first tip is to keep the button secured so your pet can't push it around. If you're using the Fluent Pet Foam hex tiles, that means putting the training button in a hex tile by itself. If you're using a different brand, try adhering the back to something. And this is just pure physics. If the button can't go anywhere and they're tapping at it, they're more likely to accidentally activate it. Try leading your pet over the button with treats to see if they'll step on it. You can also try giving the paw command, and when their paw is on the button, try holding the treat forward so they have to lean in order to get it. We need them to learn that the weight has to come from the shoulder, and this is a strategy that can help with that. Try putting the button in a high traffic area for your pet, along a path that they normally walk, near their scratching post, or by their food. Try holding play sessions near the button to try to get your pet to accidentally hit the button in the heat of the moment. This was really useful for Justin and I. Similarly, we had a lot of luck using a laser pointer on the buttons. You can go ahead and point it right at the button and try to get your pet to pounce. Get creative here. Anytime you can get your pet to accidentally press the button, you're strengthening that association and making them more likely to press it on their own. So with Justin, we'd been paw target training for about a week when I started hearing the button go off while I was working in another room. I would run around the corner to reward him and find him laying on the button. As soon as he learned that he could summon me with attention and treats every time he pressed it, I was hearing it go off constantly. It took him a few more days after that to start using his paw instead of his entire body. We just kept up with paw target training and some of the tips I've talked about here, and he was able to make the connection on his own. Stories like this are common. Your pet might not make the connection in front of your eyes. I highly recommend leaving the training button out and accessible at all times, just like their regular buttons, so they can experiment with it. Once your pet is consistently pressing the training button, you can transition them back to their regular buttons. All you need to do for this process is lead them over to their regular button, give them the paw command, and see if they press it. If they don't, you can do paw target training sessions over the regular buttons instead of the training button. And as soon as your pet starts pressing their regular buttons, you can take the training button away for good. I often hear from people wondering what to do if their pet isn't food motivated. First, I would make sure you've tried a really wide variety of treats. Like I mentioned earlier in this video, I had to try about a dozen different kinds until I found something that Justin liked enough to use this method. I would also make sure that you've tried using high-value treats, things like chicken or egg. If that's still not doing it, I would recommend using a favorite toy under the container instead of a treat. Obviously, you'll probably need to use a bigger container than the one that I used, and you might need to play with the toy first before hiding it under the container to get your pet engaged. For the later steps of paw targeting, you can use praise as a reward if the toy is too distracting, but for that first step, we need something that your pet is going to paw to try to get at. Finally, if a toy isn't doing it either, I would go ahead and skip paw target training and instead focus on what I talked about earlier in this video about encouraging accidental presses. And for that, of course, you'll use praise as a reward instead of a treat. You want to make sure that you're still setting aside time each day to spend with your pet at the training button so that they learn that it's special and fun. Make sure to occasionally model it for them and praise your pet anytime they show interest in the button. And that's it for paw target training. The process is a little different for every pet, but I hope that these concepts helped. Again, time, patience, and consistency are the most important parts of this process. I have more training videos on the way, so make sure you subscribe so you don't miss out. And go ahead and leave a comment down below if this was helpful for you or if you have questions. Thank you so much for watching, and I hope you have happy conversations with your pet. Bye!